a topic that is something a little bit controversial about the jhanas, and maybe people online will look this up later, and I can hopefully shed some light on this topic. And this is actually a continuation of a workshop that Ajahn Brahmali and I were giving last year, end of last year. We were speaking on samadhi and the jhanas, and we had so much fun that some of the important subjects we had no more time for. And today I want to speak about the similes for the jhanas. So, who of you here has been to those workshops? Who of you here has heard about the jhanas before? Okay, all of you. Well, that's good. So, the Buddha taught deep states of meditation called jhanas, and he also made some beautiful similes for those jhanas, and those happen in a handful of suttas, and today I will talk about those similes and show what the meaning of those similes is and how they illuminate what the jhanas are about. But before I do, I briefly want to address one of the words that is used throughout these similes, and that word is the word kaya. Kaya in the Pali Canon has a variety of meanings. Just like in English, some words just don't have a single meaning. And the word kaya is usually, well, not usually, is sometimes it means the physical body. However, it does not always mean physical body. Just like in the word body in English does not always mean the physical body. We can also say in English, I met somebody on the street. And then you don't mean you met a physical body. It means you met a person. So in Pali, the word kaya can also mean a person. And when it sometimes says in the suttas, you experience something with the kaya, then that means you experience it personally. And it does not mean you experience it with the body. For example, there are suttas which talk about experiencing the Dhamma with the kaya, or experiencing Nibbana with the kaya, or the highest truth with the kaya. Of course, that does not mean you experience the highest truth with the body. You experience it personally, is what that means. You experience Nibbana personally. And the same with the jhanas as well. There are some phrases that some translators unfortunately translate, you experience the bliss or the happiness of the jhanas with the body. But it does not mean that. It means you experience it personally or directly. And I have not making this up, you can even look in dictionaries. So one of the definitions for kaya in the most recent dictionary by the Pali Text Society goes as follows. Kaya, it has a whole much more, but I just pick out this This sutta, you should understand it as such, and in this sutta, understand it as such. Yeah, that makes sense? But I leave all that out, but otherwise it would be a long quote, but this is what that the Pali English Dictionary says. Best to be grouped here, and then it refers to the Jhana Similes, which I will discuss in a moment, is an application of kaya, the word kaya, in the sense of the self as experiencing a great joy, or the sukha, the happiness, the whole being, or the inner sense, or heart, or we could say the mind. This dictionary is over 100 years old now, but it is very astute to note that when we refer to the Jhana Similes, the word kaya does not mean the body. And this is, if I bring across one message today, this is the one. That in the Jhana Similes, the word kaya does not mean the body. It means something more like the whole being. And I will translate it as the experience, your experience, instead of your body. Just like when we say somebody is the person, not just the body. Yeah? Does that make sense? Okay. And I've spoke about this word kaya in more detail in the workshops, and everybody who was here, and we had much more people, everybody agreed with me that kaya does not always mean body and that we should translate it differently. So, our sutta for today is Anguttara Nikaya number 5.28. And because there are some not so good translations, in my opinion, humble opinion, I made one of myself, which I will be reading from today. And for those online, if you would want to read the whole suttas, you can go to this website that's on the screens, suttas.github.io, and there I put my translation of this sutta. Just click on Anguttara Nikaya 5.28 and you'll find the sutta. The sutta is called Five-Factored Unification of the Mind. Unification of the mind is my translation of samadhi, and I also explained a little bit about this in the workshop. Samadhi means coming together, unification. Stillness is what Ajahn Brahm uses. I'm not totally against that. It's maybe a bit more pragmatical translation. Unification of mind might sound a bit abstract. If you haven't experienced the jhanas, you might not really make much sense, but that's what it literally means. It's also explained in the suttas when they say samadhi is cittasa ekagata, like oneness of the mind, unification of the mind. So when you read unification of mind in my translations, it is samadhi. So we are talking about five-factored samadhi. And we'll see that 4 of those factors are the jhanas, and 1 factor is a surprise for later. We'll see what the 5th is. But the 5th also says something about what the jhanas are like. Now maybe before I start diving into the sutta and talking about the jhanas, is why do we speak about these things, the jhanas, and why did we give those workshops? And first of all, I think it's important to have a sense of direction in your meditation. The jhanas are very deep states of meditation, and sometimes when we tell people about them, they get almost discouraged. Like yesterday even, I had a question after the meditation, or was it after the talk? I can't remember now, but somebody asked, can I, as a lay person in a marriage, can I even attain these jhanas? But that's not the point, whether it's yes or no. It's the point about our practice is going in a certain direction, you know. We want to keep moving towards more peace and improving ourselves. And it's not a black or white question, really. Like if I say something, the jhanas are deep states of meditation, the point is not for you to give up on meditation because it sounds too hard. It's to inspire you to go into that direction. And I will emphasize throughout this lecture today, that jhanas are states where the mind is isolated from the outside world. You don't notice the five senses anymore. And you will all have heard Ajahn Brahm talk about this before. This is, I believe, also how the Buddha explained it, how the suttas explain it. And this is important knowledge, because the way we look at the jhanas, even if we haven't experienced them yet, it determines how we meditate. If some teacher tells you, the jhanas are states where you really focus on your body, and another teacher tells you it's states where you move away from the body, then your practice will be different depending on that. Because you're either going to be focusing more on the body, or you're focusing more on the mind and letting go of the burden of the body. So even if I'm saying this to guide you in the right direction. And also there will be people listening to this, maybe in this hall, maybe online, who have experienced the jhanas. And sometimes, if you have experienced a real jhana, it can be sort of isolating, because you experience something that almost indescribable, and that most people in the world cannot understand, especially people that don't meditate. And if then people explain the jhanas wrongly, like it's an experience of your body, then you feel even more isolated, because you're like, no, that's not what it feels like to me. So I also want to explain this so we can, so I can show you that the Buddha was not talking about those kind of things, and that if you have experienced one of these jhanas, you can actually find some emotional support in the suttas as well. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the sutta. Mendicants, or monks and nuns, I will teach you how to develop the noble five-factored right unification of mind. That's a little bit of a mouthful. Noble five-factored right unification of mind. But right unification of mind is right samadhi, or right stillness, if you will. Five-factored is the four jhanas plus something else, which will be the surprise. And noble is just like the Noble Eightfold Path. So noble right samadhi with five aspects is what the Buddha is going to be teaching us. Please listen and pay close attention to what I shall say. Yes, sir, the mendicants replied. The Buddha then said, so, mendicants, how do you develop this noble five-factored right unification of the mind? Yeah, how do you develop it? Then the Buddha starts with the standard formula for the first jhana. Then, after you get fully separated from sensual experiences, or I think this is an old version of my translation, sensory experiences and unskillful states of mind. This is the five senses, is the sensory experiences. You get fully separated from them, from the five senses. And unskillful states of mind, or unwholesome states of mind. Those are the five hindrances. I hope you're all familiar with the five hindrances. Then you attain the first jhana. So the way to attain the first jhana, it's repeated over and over again in the suttas, hundreds of times, literally, is to separate yourself from the sensory experiences, from the kamas, and from the five hindrances. Sort of the two things you have to do: stop the five hindrances and move away from the five senses. Yeah? And there's two things, because if you're enlightened, you don't have five hindrances all the time. But sometimes you're still in the sensory world when the enlightened monks and nuns go for alms round, for example. They live in the five sense world for a while. And then when they meditate, they have to separate themselves from the sensory world, no longer hearing sounds, feeling the body, and moving within, the mind within. So even the Buddha had to do this. He didn't have to let go of the five hindrances, of course, but he had to separate himself still from the sensory world, from the sensual experiences, to attain the first jhana. And in the first jhana, there is delight and bliss, which are my translations of piti and sukha, sometimes also joy and happiness, or something along those lines, caused by the separation from these five senses and from the hindrances. There's the light and bliss caused by the separation, to which the mind moves and holds on. This is the translation of Vitakka Vichara, and I explained this in more detail in the workshop as well. Sorry, I keep referring to that workshop, but this was supposed to be part of it, so if you want to, you can look that up online. So, then you attain the first jhana, and the Buddha now continues with a part of the sutta which is not standard for the jhana simile, and it only occurs a handful of times throughout the canon. You drenched, suffused, filled, pervaded your experience, your kaya. Remember, the word kaya does not mean body always, with delight and bliss caused by the separation, so that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with it. You drench, suffused, filled, pervaded, those are all synonyms. In the Pali, is often words are just used as synonyms. They basically mean the same thing. So what it means here is that your whole experience is filled with delight and bliss caused by being separated from the five senses. That's all you experience. It's only this piti sukha, only this. And I also explained that the piti sukha are also mental states. In the suttas, piti is also called piti mano, which means the delight or the joy, if you will, of the mind, or mental delight, delighted mind. That is what it means. And that is how it's referred to. For some reason, people still think that piti is like bodily feelings, like goosebumps or whatever, but that's not what it is. It's a mental experience, a purely mental experience. And the Buddha is here saying, no single part of your whole experience is not this. So basically you're saying it's a purely mental experience of piti sukha. And this piti sukha in the first jhana, although we translate it as delight and bliss, it's more experienced as one thing, almost. Well, not almost, it's experienced. I was almost tempted to translate it as delightful bliss or blissful delight. It's like an emotion which is not two separate things per se, but it becomes more simple in the later jhanas, and then the delightful part, or the let's say the sharper part of it, falls away, and the experience becomes more simple. I'll come back to that when we get to those jhanas. But so far, any questions? Yeah?
I just want to ask you, when you're in the jhana, what state? Are you still in the sensual or Dhammaloka or which one?
Okay, yeah, sorry, there was a microphone, but I'll just repeat the question. Thanks, Al. What state are you in? If you're in the jhana, are you still in the sensory realm, or? No, your body is still in the sensory world, you could say, but your mind and your whole experience moves towards the inside, towards your mind. Meditation, we let go of things. We let go of the hindrances. We let go of the outer world. Your sounds start fading away, and the mind moves within itself. So it's a purely mental experience. It's like another world, really, and what it feels like you're in another world of the mind, the realm of the mind. And because it's so different, such a different world that you normally don't experience, this is why it can give rise to such deep insights about life. Because you experience the mind directly. You've never really experienced the mind from within, as it were. Now, always indirectly. And you're always distracted by the sensory world, never a chance to really look at this thing we call the mind. Yeah?
We still have the feeling.
You're still conscious, yes. You're super conscious, actually. You've never been so aware before. And you still have feelings as well. And when you come out, you also be super aware still. But you're no longer in the jhana, but the hindrances are still gone after you come out of jhana. And then you experience the sensory world again. And you're still aware. But in the jhanas especially, you're super aware. But only of this, in the first jhana, of this piti sukha. That's the only thing you're aware of. Yeah, that's what your mind is focused on.
So which one is it? We are in the sensual world, or in a material world, or non-material world? Which one is it?
In the jhanas,
Yes.
you're in the you could say, they call it sometimes rupa loka, but that's more like a place of rebirth, the rupa lokas. So your body is still in the normal human realm, but your mind is inside itself. So it's not really a realm per se. It's just a state of mind, the jhanas. Yeah, they're not realms; they're states of mind. Yeah. So I'll move on now. At the end, maybe Nicholas also a question.
Ajahn, what is the Pali word for separation?
Vivicca, or it's separated. It's like sometimes withdrawn, or how else do they translate it? It's like viviceva kamehi is separated from sensual experiences. Vivicca. It literally means to withdraw. Yeah. Or having withdrawn. Yeah. Having become isolated is another way to translate it. Okay, well, we haven't gotten to the simile yet, but that's coming soon now. Actually, right now. Imagine a skilled bath attendant or his apprentice who pours bath powder into a metal dish and sprinkles it gradually with water. He kneads it until the lump of bath powder is soaked and saturated, filled with moisture throughout, yet none of it trickles out. So this simile was maybe more visual in the time of the Buddha, because we don't use this bath powder anymore, at least I don't, maybe some of you do, but in the time of the Buddha they had a special powder, and then that they would put water on, and then they would make that into a ball, almost like we make dough now from flour, And this powder becoming a single ball of a lump. Can you imagine what I'm trying to visualize? You have this powder and it becomes a single lump. This represents the unification that I talked about before. Before the jhana, your experiences of sounds, smells, taste, and the mind and everything, your body, it's all like spread out, you could say. It's separated. It's broken up. The word for the powder, it may even literally be, it's Jhana, which might even literally mean broken up. But this, we unificate the mind. We make our experience of one thing instead of multiple things. This is represented here by this powder, which is all separated, becoming one single lump. And this lump of bath powder is soaked and saturated, filled with moisture, yet none of it trickles out. What this means represents, the moisture represents the piti sukha. So as I said before, your whole experience is of this piti sukha, this delightful bliss. Likewise, the whole lump of bath powder is all soaked with water, The water stands for the Piti Sukha. Can you visualize this? If not, I got a little bit of an aid. So I could not find the bath powder, but this is somebody kneading some dough. And of course, dough you start with the flour and you put water on it and you make it into a dough. And what do you do when you knead the dough? Yeah, like you squeeze it and you let it go again, you squeeze it and you know the professional pizza makers, they do it like this. You press it and you let go again, you press it and you let go again. I'm not a good cook, but am I right? That's how you knead dough, right? Yeah. And that is, the pressing and the letting go is like the kneading. Yeah, the kneading is pressing and letting go. And this is actually represents the what I translated as the mind moving and holding on. So this is the Vitakka Vichara. In the first jhana, although I said you only experience Piti Sukha, the Piti Sukha is not stable yet. The mind moves towards it and moves away from it again. And this happens because the mind cannot simply let the delight and bliss be as it is. It feels the need to grab it, to keep hold of it. And this is like kneading the dough. And if you squeeze the dough too tightly, or the bath powder too tightly, then you would squeeze out the water. That's the idea, I believe. If you squeeze too tightly, you would destroy the lump because the water gets out. And it's the same, when the mind is in the first jhana, it realizes if I hold on too tight to this Piti Sukha, I will destroy it. You don't think like that, but the mind intuitively realizes this, and therefore it lets go again. And letting go again, then it becomes, the Piti Sukha becomes stronger again. And Ajahn Brahm explains it like this. The mind instinctively grasps at the bliss, which is the Sukha or the Piti Sukha, because the bliss of the first jhana is fueled by letting go. Such involuntary grasping weakens the bliss. Seeing the bliss weaken, the mind automatically lets go of its grasping and the bliss increases in power again. Then the mind grasps again, then the mind lets go again. Does this sound very familiar to the pressing and letting go of the kneading of the dough? And to me, that is such a beautiful simile, the kneading of the powder into a single lump and then not squeezing it too tightly so the water leaks out, but still pressing and letting go again, pressing and letting go again. It's like grasping again and letting go again. It's a wonderful simile. And when I read this, and especially when I also read Ajahn Brahm's quote when I prepared for this workshop, I had the tears in my eyes because I realized that from the time of the Buddha, those teachings on those immensely powerful states of mind, the teachings that he gave with the lump of bath powder, that they are still alive these days. And they were kept alive for centuries by people actually practicing these things. And then if ever one of you ever experiences one of these things, then you read these things again and you'll be blown away, like, wow, what the Buddha did and what he explained with the bath powder is exactly what you experienced. And you'll be, and that's so powerful. Yeah? Is this all can you follow along with me? Okay, happy. So that was the first jhana. And I'm just going to move on because if we do questions, I realize we won't have enough time. We might not have enough time anyway. Further, after the moving and holding subside, you attain the second jhana. So this was the first jhana, now we go on to the second jhana. What happens? The moving and holding subsides, so this movement of the mind towards the bliss subside. Why does this happen? Because the mind is now confident within. It's okay, it's alright with letting the piti sukha just be, it's confident in it. And it's at one, meaning no longer moving or holding on. Yeah, at one is another way to say unified. So there is just delight and bliss caused by the unification. The unification away from the, not only from the, in this case, not only from the five senses, but also unified in the sense that it's no longer moving. It's still. That's why Ajahn Brahm likes to translate it as stillness, particularly because of this, that in the second jhana there is no more movement at all. And now you drench, suffused, filled, pervaded your experiences with this delight and bliss, piti sukha, caused by the unification, caused by the stillness, if you will, so that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with it. Now, remember, how do we attain the first jhana? At the beginning of the workshop. What did I say? What do you need to do to attain the first jhana? Yes, become separated from the five senses and the five hindrances, right. So that is the instruction to attain the jhana. Let me go back to the first jhana for a moment. When the Buddha says here, you drenched, suffused, filled, pervaded your experience with delight and bliss caused by the separation, blah, blah, blah. That is not the instruction to attain the jhana. That is a description of what it is like, the result of attaining the jhana. The instruction to attain the jhana is to let go of the five hindrances and the five senses, and this is repeated over and over again in the suttas. Because some teachers say that the instruction is to drench, suffuse your whole body, they translate with piti sukha, but that is not the way to attain the jhanas. This is just a description of what happens when you let go. So it's the same for the second jhana. You drenched, suffused, filled, pervaded your experience with piti sukha caused by the unification or the stillness, but that is a natural result of letting go. It's not, you don't actively do this. And one reason you don't actively do this because in the jhanas you have no control anymore over what you're doing. It's a completely automated process. Now comes the simile for the second jhana. Imagine a lake which has no water flowing in from the east, west, north or south, and which is also never replenished with rain. But it has water welling up within. The spring of water welling up within the lake drenches, suffuses, fills, pervades that lake with cool water, so that no single part of the lake is not pervaded with it. What do you think it means? Water welling up from within. What does that stand for? Sorry? Yes, for the bliss. But what and within means, where does it come from? From the mind. Yes, exactly. To me, this is such a clear simile that the jhanas are mental states and not bodily states. Sometimes I get so sad when I read people saying the jhanas are bodily states. I'm sorry that I keep repeating this, but to me it's so important to get this message across. As I said, if I just get one message across today, it is that the jhanas are not bodily feelings. To me it's so clear here. No water flowing in from the east, west, north or south and never replenished with rain. This is the five senses, exactly. The body, the hearing, the seeing, the smelling, the tasting, 5 directions, 5 senses, there is no water flowing in from there, there's no experience coming from there, there's no piti sukha coming from there, but it's all welling up from within. That's such a beautiful, perfect simile if you understand and if you can relate a little bit to this. Again, you don't have to have attained the jhana, but to relate to this, because already before that, if your meditation goes a little bit in this direction, you can get already inspired by this, like you feel joy coming up from the mind, from within. The joy that comes from keeping the precepts, the joy that comes from recollecting the Buddha, that kind of a joy is mental, it's not a physical feeling. So the water comes all from within the lake. In other words, the happiness, the piti sukha, comes all from the mind. And still, no single part of the lake is not pervaded with it. In other words, no single part of your whole experiences, which is a completely mental experience, is something different from this piti sukha. This is the only thing you experience. This is why it's also unification of mind, because you experience one thing, one object. The mind is no longer moving from one object to another. Even in the first jhana, although it's moving, it's not moving from one object to another. It's moving, it's like zooming in and out on the same object. It's moving, let's say, towards and away from the object in this direction and not to a different object, yeah? So even in the first jhana, it's just a single object of piti sukha. But in the second jhana, that movement is also gone. So this is an image of a clear lake with no water coming from any of the 5 directions and all coming up from within. So like that lake, you drenched, diffused, filled, pervaded your experience with delight and bliss caused by the unification, by the mind no longer moving, so that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with this. That is the second step in the development of the noble 5-factored right unification of the mind. Okay. Nice. Now, third jhana. It gets better and better. Further, after the delight fades away too, so the piti fades away as well, you attain the third jhana. And this is, again I said that the piti sukha are not really two different things, but they're like two aspects of the same thing, if you will. And at some point the most coarse aspect of it fades away too, the delight fades away too, or the joy fades away. And there is just where you're just even-minded or equanimous, mindfully and aware, you yourself experience just the bliss, so only the sukha now remains. So you yourself experience just the bliss. And sometimes translated, you experience the bliss with the body, but that is, I said that already, that's not proper. Anyway, which the noble ones describe as blissful abiding, equanimous and mindfully. You transfuse, filled, pervaded your whole experience with the bliss that is free from the light. So now you have sukha without the piti. That is bliss free from the light. Sukha without piti. So that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with it. Now don't think too much about exactly what sukha, the void of piti might be, but just get the general sense of these similes, and especially the sense of this unification, that the whole mental experience. Imagine blue water lilies, pink lotuses or white lotuses in a pond. Now some of these flowers, they thrive underwater. sprouting and growing in the water without rising above the surface. They are drenched, suffused, filled, pervaded with cool water from the tip to the root. So again, this is a simile for how the jhanas are experience of very simple experience where you're completely experiencing one thing. These lotuses, they are all surrounded, as it were, by the water. That's the only thing they, in a sense, experience. That's the only thing they are in. Likewise, the mind is only in one state, completely suffused, if you will, with this sukha. So now still we have all these water similes. The first simile also had water. Remember the kneading of you sprinkle on the water stands for the piti sukha. In the second simile we also had water in the lake, and now we have cool water, and that totally pervades. So no longer are you kneading the water, you're no longer moving the mind, now you're just totally surrounded by it, if you will. Even the word you are surrounded by is not really appropriate, but that's another topic maybe, anatta. But it's only piti sukha, only sukha in this stage. So here is a picture of an underwater lotus to visualize what's going on. So in the third jhana, you're like a lotus on the water, and the water is cool. And cool in the suttas is always a good thing. Here this morning it was very cold. Lynn, I see you're also still very cold in the back. So we think cold is a negative thing, but in hot India, cool was always positive experience. That is why Nibbana is also cool. And the jhanas are cool. And just like the water is cool. So likewise, you drenched the fused field, pervaded your experience with the bliss free from the light, so that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with it. Your whole experience is just bliss. Wow, that sounds like something worth giving a shot. To me anyway. Yeah. That is the third step in the development of the Noble Five-Factored Right Unification of Mind, or the third step in developing 5 aspects of Samadhi. All right, moving on. Further, after the bliss is abandoned, you attain the fourth jhana, the purification of mindfulness and equanimity, where since pain was abandoned as well as the bliss, so pain or dukkha is abandoned in the sense of mainly not dukkha completely abandoned, because for that you need to become enlightened, but pain in a more core sense. And earlier happiness and unhappiness ended too, so sukha and dukkha are abandoned, and also somanas and domanas, happiness and unhappiness. These are basically just ways to emphasize that now your mind is in a neutral state. Even the bliss or the sukha was seen, or the happiness was seen as a little bit of a burden. So that too is let go. So even the bliss is abandoned. And now there's just a neutral feeling. You sit having pervaded your experience. Again, this is what happens, not what you do. You sit having pervaded your experience with the pure bright mind, so that there is no single part of your whole experience that is not pervaded with it. So you only experience a pure and bright mind, an equanimous mind, a mind of mindfulness and equanimity. A pure bright mind. You don't pervade your body with a pure bright mind. To me that doesn't make sense, pervading your body with the mind. I mean, you can fill your mind with the body if you're just aware of the body, but you don't put your mind in the body in that sense. So it's your experience is the pure bright mind. Imagine a man sitting, covered head to toe with white cloth, so that there is no single part of him that is not covered by it. Can you imagine that? A man sitting all covered by a white cloth. What can he still see? You're covered by a cloth. If I'm covered by my robe, well, to be honest, I can see through my robe a little bit, but to me the idea here is that is again the being shut off from the five senses. You're covered, you're inside. You cannot experience the world anymore because you're covered under this cloth. And it's a white cloth because, of course, that stands for the pure mind. White is the color of purity in Buddhism. So imagine somebody totally covered with white cloth. No part of him is not covered by it. It's a bit hard to see maybe, but I found an Halloween dog, like who is dressed up as a Casper the Ghost. He can actually still see through it, but imagine that those holes would also be filled, and he couldn't see anything. Likewise, so similarly to that, you sit having pervaded your experience with the pure bright mind, so that there is no single part of your experience that is not pervaded with it. No single part of your experience is not pure bright mind, is basically what the Buddha is saying. You're only experiencing pure bright mind. That is the fourth step in the development of, that's two times development of. So that's the fourth step in the development of the noble five-factored right unification of the mind. So those were the four jhanas. Are you excited about it? Okay, but I'm still at the fifth factor to discuss, just to finish off, because now we want to know what is the fifth factor, right? The fifth factor is actually not a jhana, but how you reflect upon the jhanas, because to develop a samadhi, it's not only important to attain the jhanas, but also to understand them, and by understanding them, for example, by understanding that the movement of the mind, the vitakka vichara in the first jhana is a hindrance, then the mind can learn to let go of it and move on towards the second jhana. So therefore the fifth aspect is further the aspect of reviewing the jhanas is well grasped, focused on, remembered, and penetrated by you, by your understanding of it. So you understand how to review the jhanas. It is like one person may look at another, like one standing may look at one sitting, or one sitting may look at one lying down. The aspect of reviewing is well grasped, focused, remembered, and penetrated by your understanding of it. That is the first step in the fifth step in the development of the noble five-factored right unification of the mind. Now the reason that this is a separate step or part of the development is that inside of the jhanas you cannot contemplate the jhanas. The mind is too still for that. There's no thinking going on inside of the jhanas. There's no even reflection or any type of control over where you direct your mind. The mind is beyond all that, and it's gone much more still. Now sometimes people think that vitakka vichara means thinking and pondering. That in the first jhana you're still thinking and pondering. Is anybody, one of you, familiar with that idea, that some people think about it like that? Yeah? But that is not what happens. And when I was giving the guided meditation yesterday, when I do guided meditation, I have to talk, have to guide other people. So it's not that easy for me to meditate then. But I talked about letting go of your thoughts, about stopping the thinking. And I do my best not to be a hypocrite. So when I had the opportunity, after the explanation, to meditate myself as well, while sitting here, I applied those techniques as well to let go of the thinking. And I was able to stop thinking for long time sitting here, 15 minutes basically not thinking at all. And for some people that would already be the second jhana. Because in the first jhana you're still thinking. And that is just lowering the bar. And it's not what jhana is really about. When I was studying engineering in the Netherlands at the Delft University, it was at that time in the top 4 or 5 universities in the world for engineering. It was really high class university and it was really difficult actually. Many people dropped out of the university. I think it was only behind MIT and some places in Germany. But what happened when I finished my studies, just a year after, the Dutch government decided we need more engineers. So they instructed the university to make it easier. And they started taking out all sorts of courses. And the curriculum got sliced, got much easier. Because they needed more engineers, so they made it easier. And this is, to me, is similar to sometimes now more people start meditating in the world, or in the recent decades, more meditation has become really popular. And now still everybody wants to achieve the jhanas, so what do? They cut the curriculum, as it were. They make things easier. They make it easier to attain. But then, just like I think those people who came to my university after me are not real engineers. Only my year was the last year of true engineers. Same with people, if they think you can still think in the jhanas, then actually they're not doing the jhanas the way the Buddha explained. You can still learn a lot from those people, they have lots of good instructions, but if you want to go all the way, then come to the BSWA. No, that rhymes. Go all the way, come to the BSWA. No, there's other people in the world teaching the same way that we do, so we're not alone. Anyway, now it's talking about here looking back upon the jhanas, because in the jhanas you cannot contemplate, so you have to review it. And just like a person who's standing looks at one sitting, yeah? Standing in Pali or in the Buddhist canon is like a more active position than sitting, and sitting is more active than lying down. So if you come out of the jhanas, your mind can be a little bit more active again, and you can look back and reflect. It's like one standing looks at one sitting. So I would like to leave it at that, and I hope that inspired you. Although I've continually said that the jhanas may be very deep, I hope that these kind of talks actually, instead of putting you off, inspire you. Sometimes maybe people don't get inspired when something is hard, maybe. Hard is not the right word even. In a sense it's easy, but it's deep. And to me it's actually inspiring to hear about states of mind that are very extraordinary, because I want to do something extraordinary. And I hope you do too. Okay, thank you for listening. Sadhu to the Buddha, actually, but we can do also sadhus afterwards. But sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And now, if there's maybe first some questions from the floor, if you have the microphone, or... Well, the simile is that the lotus is not above the water, but under the water. It's not really explained why the simile is like that, but it is being in the water is like being pervaded, surrounded by it. And the water stands for the piti sukha, so you're like, in that third jhana only the sukha. So you're like only experiencing sukha, it's like it's all around in a sense. You're totally... your mind is totally filled with it, immersed in it.
So if it's above the water, would that be any difference?
Well, that's not what the simile is. The simile is not about above the water. It's about under the water. So. No, yeah, that's not what the simile is about above the water. So yeah, if you come above the water, you come out of the jhana. Maybe you could say that. Yeah. And you fall back into the lower jhanas or come out of the jhanas. Excellent. Thank you very much. How do we know the teachings on jhanas are authentic if monastics cannot confirm if they have experienced jhanas? So, now, what they mean is we cannot say to lay people that we have experienced jhanas if we have, because that is actually an offense to do so. It's against our code of conduct. And that is, by the way, also to me a sign that these jhanas are something extraordinary, because we are also not allowed to say in the same group of things that we're not allowed to confirm that we have is also enlightenment and psychic powers and the jhanas, those kind of things. Yeah, and it makes little sense to me that jhanas would be something that almost everybody can experience in their first retreat. That's what some people say. And then we would not be allowed to talk about it in that way. It's actually, we are not allowed to talk about it because it's something so extraordinary. And if you have attained it and people hear about it, they put you higher than other monastics. And the idea is that we are all seen equally whether we have attained the jhanas or not. Anyway, how do we know that the jhana teachings are authentic if monastics cannot confirm it? Well, even if we could confirm it, and let's say I experienced the jhana, let's say that I would say that. Then is it then suddenly you know what is authentic? Then it's just your trust in me or trust in Ajahn Brahm or whatever. So even if we could confirm, it doesn't change anything. The only way that you can confirm what is authentic is by experiencing these things for yourself. If you experience a jhana and then you hear monastics talk about it the proper way, you read the suttas, you read books by Ajahn Brahm, for example, then you'll know that your experience and what Ajahn Brahm is talking about are exactly the same thing. The jhana is the first jhana, second jhana, etc. are very defined experiences. And we've seen that the Buddha also really explains them in a specific way. Like you experience only this piti sukha, for example, in the first jhana. And then you'll know that what the Buddha was talking about, and your faith in the Buddha will increase 100-fold. And also these similes will make so much more sense. And that is how you know which teachings on jhanas are authentic. Venerable Sunyo, is there an observer left in the experience of jhana? No, because there is awareness, but nobody who is aware. The sense of self is actually part of the hindrances, and it's also let go of. So there is consciousness, but not somebody who is conscious, or there is observing, but no observer. And that sounds a little bit weird maybe, but that's the way that it is. In normal life we feel like we are the one who experiences life. Like we see things, we hear things. It's this being inside. Like have any of you seen Men in Black movie? The first one, Men in Black? No, not famous in Australia. You've seen it? Well, there's one scene where there is this person You've seen it. There's this person who's actually a robot, and then the robot head opens up, and there's this little alien inside. And that is what I sometimes visualize with this sense of self. There's like a little being inside of our heads who controls everything and who experiences everything. And that's what it feels like. But that is what the Buddha said is an illusion. Illusion. And in the jhana, actually, that illusion temporarily stops. And this is also why reviewing the jhanas is important, because if you look back upon the jhanas, and if you have the courage to realize that there's no sense of self inside of the jhanas, you'll realize that also outside of the jhanas, the sense of self was just an illusion. And then you might be able to have some deep insights. Dear Venerable Sunyo, that's me. What exactly happens just before one experiences the first jhana? Do the sensory experiences vanish suddenly, or do they slowly disappear? Thank you for so much for your wisdom. That's actually the Buddha's wisdom that we've shared today, but I'm happy to illuminate it a little bit for you. Almost always they will, it's actually two questions. What exactly happens just before one experiences the jhana, and do sensory experience vanish suddenly or slowly? So usually sensory experiences disappear slowly. And actually already before the jhana you will have let go of the feelings of your body, and the sounds will have faded away. And you might still hear an occasional sound or something, but your experience is usually one of a nimitta, what we call a nimitta, which is a reflection of the mind. So you're already looking at the mind. Usually the mind represents itself as a light, but the other possibilities are certain shapes, or even sounds can happen. So you don't hear a sound with your ear, but it's like a sound inside of you in a way. It's hard to explain. And also, when you see a light, you don't see it with your eyes, but it's experienced by the mind. So already before the jhana, sensory experiences have almost completely vanished, if not completely. But what happens just before one experiences the first jhana is you let go. You let go. It's a moment of letting go. Letting go of exactly the sense of self that I was talking about before. So you let go of that, and then the mind can go within. In a sense, it merges with the nimitta, or it goes inside of itself, you could say. Bhante, could not both body meditations and other meditations lead to jhana? For instance, if one notices anicca and dukkha in the body, the mind does not delight even pleasant in the body. It is anicca. So could not body meditation lead to jhana? Well, it can lead to it. The Buddha encouraged to meditate on the body. And I do guided meditations. I also teach you to focus on the body and relax it and stuff. And the Buddha also talked about many other types of meditation. Metta meditation, recollecting generosity, and so forth. But that is not jhana itself. So it could lead to it, for sure. It could lead to it. But it's the same thing that the whole Eightfold Path, in a sense, leads up to the jhanas. The jhanas are part of right samadhi, which is the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. And all the 7 factors before, all together lead to the jhanas. The factors of the Eightfold Path are, in a sense, almost sequential. You start with right view, right thought, or right intention, whatever. And then right sila, your right behavior, then right mindfulness, and then you get right samadhi. And body meditation is part of right mindfulness, yeah? Not part of right samadhi. So yes, it can lead to it, but don't stop there. Go further. One more comment from Switzerland. I had this experience in meditation where I stopped breathing. This was so great, I could have stayed in this moment forever. Yeah, maybe you really stop breathing, but what often happens is that people still breathe. If you would have stopped breathing forever, then I don't know how you would be able to still type this comment. But usually you just stop noticing that you're breathing because your breath becomes too subtle to notice, or your mind just moves on to something more pleasant, like those nimittas that I was talking about, for example. It moves towards more joy. This was so great, I could have stayed there forever. Well, that is a very recommendable state to be in, if that feels great. And please stay in that moment forever, and it will grow on you, actually. It will become even more stronger and more beautiful. Then, extra question. Is Venerable Sunyo coming to Europe soon? No, because we soon have the range retreat, and I intend to spend it here. I've been to Europe a couple of months ago, but no, I have no intentions to come back anytime soon, but maybe one day I'll be back. For now, I'm here. And then there's also lots of, Ella is sending through lots of comments that are thanking the BSWA and Sunyo and the audio team. May it be of benefit for all beings. And may the Buddha's teachings on the Jhana Similes also be of benefit to all beings. May it inspire all of you here. It has certainly inspired me. And may it also inspire the people listening on the internet to, as I said at the beginning of this class, I teach these deeper, what I would call the jhanas, which are a bit deeper than some people teach it, not to discourage you, to make meditation sound more difficult, but to show you what is possible. By dumbing down the jhanas, by slicing the curriculum, as I said before, it's not only making things in a sense too easy, it's also the taking away from what is actually possible within your mind. And I don't want you to underestimate what you can do, what is actually possible. Yeah? This is another way of looking at it. By teaching the deeper jhanas, actually we teach that you have more within you than you might think. And all of you listening to this have the possibility to experience these things. So, thank the Buddha for that, and let us all finish with 3 big sadhus to the Buddha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right.